Greetings fellow slayers and newcomers alike. Today we are creating the ultimate Darth Vader build in Baldur's Gate 3. Vader is the most iconic villain of all time and is personally one of my favorite characters in all of media. So much so that he will probably end up as a lore video here in the future. There are a few ways to go about creating Darth Vader or Anakin, so consider subscribing before you click off, as this build will be 3 Paladin and 9 Warlock. Paladin spells are easily headcanoned, such as Divine Smite being a lightsaber strike or Command being Vader using the Force. And the Warlock patron is obviously the Force itself. For extra flavor, make Sidious the Guardian. Leave a comment down below with any suggestions for future builds, and for access to the written version of Darth Vader as well as my full catalog of builds, consider visiting the Patreon where these lovely folk have gathered round. Thank you all for your support. You all are absolute legends, and may the Force be with you. Welcome to Purge Evil. Thank you for stopping by. Let's get into it. Character creation in level 1. To begin, Vader is still technically a human, but you could argue taking half elf for the extra perks like dark vision, headcanoning them to be from his extra force sensitivity, or even the suit. For the background, I chose the dark urge for the haunted one, flavoring this as the ever-present dark side. Quick note, if you want extra attack by 5, just play Paladin till 5, then take 3 levels into Warlock. At level 8, respec for 3 Paladin and 5 Warlock. You could also play Warlock to 5 and do it the other way around, but it really is up to you and your preference of how you want to play Vader. With that being said, today we begin the game as a Paladin. Oath of Vengeance to be specific, though I suppose you could argue for any of the other subclasses. At any point, you can take Oathbreaker if you want that flavor, but for the purposes of this video, we will remain Vengeance. This grants us Lay on Hands for some quick force healing, Divine Sense, and Inquisitor's Might, which adds more saber damage and can daze enemies. For skills, take Insight, Perception, and Persuasion, and for starting stats, Strength at 16, Dex at 10, Constitution at 14, Intelligence at 8, Wisdom at 8, and Charisma at 17. After you hit Warlock 3, you can respec for Strength at 8, Dex at 10, Constitution at 16, Intelligence at 8, Wisdom at 14, and Charisma at 17. With our Charisma at 17 in both cases, make sure to get the Hag's Hair for a bonus +1 to Charisma. Do note that in Star Wars itself, Charisma is a force stat as well as Wisdom, and Charisma also buffs Leadership, which Vader of course has, so we don't even have to headcanon too much for this stat spread. You may want more Dex if playing solo, or just increase Initiative through gear. As another quick note to remember before we get into the rest of the build, you can exchange a level of Paladin for Fighter or Sorcerer later on when you respec. If you want Constitution Proficiency, though this is entirely optional and does sacrifice the Paladin's level 3 abilities. Level 2. Now at level 2 we unlock Divine Smites, which as mentioned before are simply lightsaber strikes, our fighting style, and Paladin spells. For fighting style we have to take Great Weapon Fighting. This is pretty self-apparent. Some other Jedi or Sith builds could utilize dueling or even 2-weapon fighting, but for Vader we have to go Great Weapon. This re-rolls a damage die if it rolls a 1 or 2. And now that we have spells, go ahead and prepare Command and Compel Duel for force abilities, Heroism so you can't be frightened and gain 5 temporary HP each turn, and any 2 of the smites. I went for Searing Smite to help mimic a lightsaber, as well as Wrathful Smite because Vader is scary. Level 3. At level 3, we unlock Divine Health, giving us immunity to disease and some vengeance abilities. Abjure Enemy frightens enemies because, again, Vader is scary, and if they pass the saving throw, they become slowed instead, so they're still quaking in their boots. Vow of Enmity gives you advantage on attack rolls against an enemy, but you can use this on yourself to gain advantage on all enemies. Bane will most likely be ignored, and Hunter's Mark can be used for some extra damage, though it does require concentration, so keep that in mind. For the prepared spell, I took Thunderous Smite. As mentioned before, this 3rd level of Paladin can later be respec'd for Fighter or Sorcerer for Constitution Proficiency. The latter is likely the better choice as this build is heavily starved of spell slots. Level 4. Moving on to level 4, we multi-class into Warlock, taking the Great Old One as our subclass for Mortal Reminder to remind enemies how scary Vader is by frightening them and nearby enemies when you land a critical hit. For cantrips, of course take Eldritch Blast, not only because Warlock, but because it literally is the Force. You can also take Mage Hand, which is also the Force, Friends, which is also the Force or just Vader commanding people, or you could take Blade Ward, which is the best option for combat. I myself would take Friends if playing solo. For spells, first we take Dissonant Whispers and headcanon this once again as the Force, possibly even a Force Choke or a Force Squeeze. Dissonant Whispers not only deals decent psychic damage, it also frightens the target because again, Vader is scary. For the second spell, I took Hex for extra damage, but this really isn't necessary, especially since we have Hunter's Mark, but it does do necrotic damage rather than physical damage. Level 5. At level 5, Warlock 2, we gain Eldritch Invocations. Simply take Agonizing and Repelling Blast. These buff Eldritch Blast to deal bonus damage equal to your Charisma modifier, and also pushes the targets away by 4.5 meters. For the spell, take anything as it will be replaced. Level 6. Here at Warlock 3, we unlock level 2 Warlock spells and our Pact Boon, which will of course be Pact of the Blade. This allows you to summon a bound weapon or bind your current weapon. In both cases, your weapon now uses your Charisma stat instead of your Strength stat, so now is the time you can respec and dump your Strength stat. Revisit level 1 for respec stats. For our spell, make sure to first take Hold Person, allowing Vader to use the Force to hold enemies in place, allowing for guaranteed criticals within melee distance. This can be absolutely abused and can trivialize some fights. Replace the last spell you took or Hex for Detect Thoughts, naturally allowing Vader to read the minds of those around him. Level 7. At Warlock 4, we have our first feat of the build, which will simply be ability improvement to buff Charisma by 2, capping it at 20. For the cantrip, take any of the 3 I mentioned earlier, that being Mage Hand, Blade Ward, or Friends, and for the spell, take Force Invisibility. Level 8. At Warlock 5, we finally unlock our extra attack. It only works if your weapon is bound, so keep that in mind. For Eldritch Invocation, we easily take Mire the Mind, granting us the Slow ability. This is one of the better spells in the game in my opinion, as it not only slows a group of enemies, they gain quite the debuff as well. AC and Dex throws are reduced by 2. They can only take 1 action or bonus action, not both. They can't take reactions. They can only make 1 attack per turn, and spells they cast might be delayed by a turn. This can all last up to 10 turns, making this one of the most powerful control spells to have. For the spell, make sure to take Counterspell. Level 9. At Warlock 6, we gain Entropic Ward, which is a reaction that can impose disadvantage on an attack roll against you. If the attack misses, you gain advantage against that very same enemy. For the spell, I took Vampiric Touch, headcanoning this to of course be Force Drain. This can be recast without expending spell slots so long as you maintain concentration, which is perfect when we don't have that many spell slots to begin with. If you'd like, you can also replace any spell for Fear or Fly. Level 10. Moving on to level 10, Warlock 7, we have level 4 Warlock spells and another Eldritch Invocation with Dreadful Word, granting us Confusion. Vader uses the Force to mess with a group of enemies' heads so that they might attack each other, wander aimlessly, or skip their turn. This is another very powerful control spell and can last for 3 turns. For the spell, Dominate Beast is easily the most flavorful. Level 11. Now here at level 11 Warlock 8, we have our second and final feat, which can be Great Weapon Master or Alert. Great Weapon Master lets you deal more damage and grants a bonus action attack if you land a critical or kill an enemy. This would be my choice and my recommendation. Alert is also very useful though, and is an honorable mention because it increases initiative by 5. For the spell, you know we have to take Fly if we didn't earlier. Level 12. Now for the final level of Darth Vader. Warlock 9 grants us level 5 Warlock spells, an Eldritch Invocation, our most iconic Vader ability, and another replacement spell. For Eldritch Invocation, take Whispers of the Grave. This allows Vader to commune with the dead through the Force. For the spell, we finally naturally have telekinesis. This spell needs no explaining, as it probably is the most iconic ability of the Force itself. We can get this from bracers in Act 2, but now at level 12, we finally can use it naturally. You can also get this from an amulet in Act 3. Telekinesis can throw a creature or object using the Force and can be recast once per turn for 10 turns without expending a spell slot, so long as concentration is maintained. Heavier items and creatures deal more damage. The biggest downside to this build is the lack of spell slots, so having some spells that can be recast is quite nice. We do, however, get to cast these spells at level 5. For instance, Hold Person can hold 4 people when upcasted to 5, which is what our Warlock spells are now at level 12. For the replacement spell, replace any previous spell with Dominate Person or Hold Monster. I myself took Hold Monster, as it allows you to hold creatures instead of just humanoids with the Hold Person spell, of course guaranteeing criticals as well. And with that, we have undoubtedly become the iconic Darth Vader. Onto the suit gear. This build has quite a few options to choose from, and there is no one correct set of gear. Locations for all gear can easily be found on the Baldur's Gate 3 wiki or my Patreon. Now for Act 1 heads, we first have the Diadem of Arcane Synergy, the Helmet of Smiting, and the Grimskull Helm. For cloaks, if you took the Dark Urge, we have the Deathstalker Mantle. For chest piece, we have the Adamantine Splint Armor. For gloves, we have the Gloves of Heroism, the Gloves of the Growling Underdog, and the Daredevil Gloves. For boots, we have the Boots of Striding, the Boots of Genial Striding, and the Vital Conduit Boots. For amulets, we have the Periapt of Wound Closure, probably the best one, and then we have the Pearl of Power Amulet. For rings, we have the Strange Conduit Ring, of course. We have the Ring of Arcane Synergy, Crusher's Ring, Ring of Flinging, Ring of Protection, and Ring of Jumping. And for melee weapons, we of course have the Everburn Blade. It has the fire enchantment, so it's kind of like a lightsaber. And for ranged weapons, we have Spell Thief and Bow of Awareness for initiative. For Act 2 heads, we have the Fistbreaker Helm and Flawed Helldusk Helmet. Cloaks, we have Cloak of Protection. For chest pieces, we have the Rippling Force Mail, the Dwarven Splint Mail, the Armor of Devotion, and Reaper's Embrace. For gloves, we have the Racnir Bracers, which are the best gloves for Darth Vader, especially early on, as they give you telekinesis and Mage Hand, and you can cast Mage Hand as a bonus action. And then we have the Flawed Helldusk Gloves. For amulets, we have Surgeon's Subjugation Amulet, and we have the Spellcrux Amulet, of course. And for rings, we have the Ring of Free Action, Killer's Sweetheart, and Shadow Blade Ring, just for a bit of flavor if you want a purple lightsaber. For melee weapons, we have the Blade of Oppressed Souls, which deals psychic damage. And then for ranged weapons, we have the Darkfire Shortbow, which among the resistance gives you haste. Now for Act 3 gear, first for heads, we have the Helm of Balduran. For cloaks, we have the Nymph Cloak. For chest piece, we have the Armor of Persistence. For gloves, we have the Crater Flesh Gloves, the Gemini Gloves, the Helldusk Gloves, the Legacy of the Masters, and the Ballast Gloves. For boots, we have the Boots of Persistence. For amulets, we have the Spell Savant Amulet and the Amulet of Greater Health. For rings, we have the Band of the Mystic Scoundrel, the Ring of Regeneration, and the Keepsake Ring. For melee weapons, we have the Sword of Chaos, which deals extra necrotic damage and regains 1 to 6 HP on hit. And for ranged weapons, we have the Hellrider Longbow, which gives a bonus +3 to initiative rolls. And once again, we do have quite a few options for endgame gear, so there really is no correct set. Nevertheless, this is what I'm wearing for the endgame outfit of this video in particular. Helm of Balduran, Cloak of Protection, Armor of Persistence, Racnir Bracers, Boots of Persistence, Amulet of Greater Health, Strange Conduit Ring, Band of the Mystic Scoundrel, Sword of Chaos, and the Darkfire Shortbow. If you made it to this point in the video, you are now obligated to like the video and subscribe to the channel. If you thought this build was trash, you are now obligated to dislike the video and come up with something better in the comments. Both of you are now obligated to ring the bell so as to not miss out on future content. If you'd like to further support the cause and become a fellow slayer of Purge Evil. The Patreon is linked down below, where you can support for as little as $1 a month and gain access to exclusive content, including all of my builds in written format, plus way more that will never become videos. This includes other games as well, fresh provisions in the pantry, and a new shiny sword for any slayer to be. I got a lot more to share with you all in due time, and if you're still here, I just want to say thank you for stopping by, and until next time, Purge Evil.
Yeah, crown in my palm, but I ain't put it on. Yeah, crown in my palm, but I ain't put it on. Yeah, crown in my palm, but I ain't put it on. Yeah, crown in my palm, but I ain't put it on. Yeah.